So we're ready to begin again, ladies and gentlemen. Also for those who joined just now the webinar, I'm Nicola Capitani from Solarplaza, and joining with me today is Benedikt Ortmann, who is Global Director of Solar Projects at BayWa Renewables. In the back, and also my colleague Tom helping with this webinar. Welcome. This is the agenda for today. It's not quite packed, as you'll see. Quick introduction from my side. A presentation from Benedikt, and we're going to have a small chat and discussion about the Polish PV market, and that's going to be the end of the webinar. First of all, Benedikt, welcome. But let's begin. So, first of all, thanks for joining. Benedikt, a quick introduction about Solarplaza. This is our mission to positively impact the world by accelerating the sustainable energy transition. We focus mostly on events in the solar industry, but also on content and resources such as today's webinar. Brief mention, we have also launched our new branch, which is the Solarplaza Consultancy branch, especially dedicated for those in the PV industry looking to expand their network and looking for partners in new markets. So this is our new range of services. In case, please feel free to drop me an email at the end of this webinar if you want to learn more about it. Some practical notes. We will have a Q&A session, so there is a question box where you can send your questions. If you have technical issues like audio or anything else, use the chat box. My colleague Tom will help out in the meantime. And we will share the presentation slides afterwards through email. So let me introduce the guest of today, Dr. Benedikt Ortmann, of course, I would say with a career dedicated to PV projects since 2003, currently Global Director of Solar Projects at BayWa Renewables, and before involved in building his own solar business for Solar SE. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Benedikt.
Yeah.
Perfect. So at this point, I would leave the screen to you, the screen sharing. Please enlighten us on the Polish PV market in some years to come. We'll have a conversation later, and in the meantime, a reminder: send in your questions, everybody, so we can answer them at the end of the webinar.
Great, thank you very much, and yeah, thanks for being invited. I'm excited to talk to you guys regarding the Polish market, because I think it's one of the most interesting markets right now in Europe for several reasons, actually. Maybe a few words regarding my person and the company I'm working for. I'm now in this branch for over 15 years now. Was working for several companies, but always dedicated to develop and construct solar projects. But we started very small with a few kilowatts, and nowadays, as you all know, it's getting bigger and bigger as the systems are getting cheaper by the day. And this, of course, is the overall story which brought us to grid parity, and which brought us to the Polish market at the end of the day. But I will come to this later. Maybe a few words regarding BayWa RE. I'm yet not able to control the slides. Now it's working. Okay, very good. So who is BayWa RE? First of all, we are a project developer. We are working globally. And in this kind of function, we were developing more than 20 gigawatt as a solar pipeline at the time, for the time being, and installed more than 3.5 gigawatt already in the past, wind and solar, as we are not only developing solar, but wind and biomass, as well as geothermal. But by far the most important technologies right now are PV. And we're doing this in many countries in the world, also in Poland, and we love to cooperate and to co-develop with local developers. So if you are interested in teaming up with us and pushing your business quickly into big scale, then I would be glad to receive your requests and emails. Next to being a project developer, we are an EPC and an O&M provider. EPC mainly for special technologies like agri-PV and floating PV, not so much ground-mounted for historical reasons. And we are providing O&M services. We have right now more than 10 gigawatts under operational management and 7 gigawatt in the direct marketing portfolio. And finally, we are trading material for electricians, for installers. We are one of the biggest wholesaler for PV components in Europe. And we are also providing energy solutions for commercial and industrial clients who want to be sourced by green energy. Well, by doing so, I was mentioning that EPC we are doing mainly for floating PV and agri-PV. Why is this? It's because we developed our own technology in these two segments, as we were seeing that the market was not really offering solutions which would be sufficient for our quality standards. And I'm glad to say that by now we are the market leader for floating PV in Europe, with an installed base of more than 100 megawatt and another 100 megawatt to be installed only this year. And we are also in the very forefront of developing agri-PV solutions. Here you can see an installation in the Netherlands where we were building panels above some fruit, soft fruit production, which works with many kinds of fruits, but it's a very complicated subject because it's really sensitive regarding the fruit the farmer is building. Well, coming to the Polish market and what we had here, we were so glad to have a very early development. Back in 2016, we started already developing a first site in Poland, which is near to Witnica. As we were building it out, we went for a market sounding of a so-called virtual corporate PPA. So what is it? What does it mean? It means that we are selling the electricity to a corporate off-taker. In our case, it was, I don't know if I can pronounce it correctly, Gorazde Heidelberg Cement. And they are taking the electricity from the plant Witnica 1. But as they have several locations all over Poland, they don't take it physically, but via a so-called virtual PPA. You can kind of compare this very well with a hedge you would have with a bank. If you want to hedge a risk of a currency risk or an interest rate risk, then you can also go for these kind of hedges, which means that you have one provider in between, which is in our case the electricity trader and the electricity provider, and they are taking the physical delivery and dispatching this to the grid. And they are, on the other hand, then taking the electricity from the grid, deliver it to Gorazde, and then the payment goes partly to the plant Witnica, which is a fixed tilt or which is a fixed price, and the kind of the let's say market discount or variation to the market price goes to the electricity provider / the electricity trader. So what does it mean for us? For us, it does mean, number one, we can sell every kilowatt hour we produce on that plant, we can sell at a fixed price, which is important for us because then we can say, okay, we have a fixed cash flow income from operating this plant. And on the other hand, the customer, Gorazde in this case, has a certain supply of electricity, and having a fixed price for his electricity at the amount we are producing. That means that they only have a price risk regarding the, let's say, the difference between what they actually use and what Witnica 1 is producing. This gives a nice combination for both partners, because Gorazde then has a price security for a certain period of time. In this contract, it is like 10 years. So they have 10 years security about the electricity price, as well as we have 10 years guaranteed price levels for the electricity we sell. And the physical, let's say, balancing of deliveries are done by the electricity provider, by the DNO, or the electricity trader. So it gives security to both parties, and it's very similar, like the look and feel in many other countries for the contract for difference schemes we know from, for instance, UK or from the Netherlands and so forth. Well, then we can skip to the next slide, showing you why this happened and what put us in the situation where we would be able to do this even in a country like Poland. If you could go to the next slide, please.
Yes, Benedikt should be able, but in case, let me take care of it.
I can't.
Let's see now.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Well, it all came down to a study which we made 5 years ago, back in 2016, where we were saying, hey, hang on a minute. We all know that panel prices are coming down over the years. Also, installation prices are coming down over the years. So when will actually be the cross of the two lines between installation costs and wholesale prices in the various countries throughout Europe? And we did this kind of analysis and were seeing, well, 2016 would already work in Southern Europe, like in Sicily or in Southern Spain. And if we kind of continue that price curve for PV, then we would end up with being at grid parity in Poland, somewhere in between the year 2021 and 2022. Well, you can see we hit the timeline, I think, pretty well, as we are now in 2021 opening our first grid parity plant in Witnica. Before that, we had opened our first plant in 2019 in the northern Germany, in Barth. And in 2018, our 175 megawatt grid parity plant, which was, to my knowledge, the first grid parity plant ever in the European Union, Don Rodrigo, in 2018. So you can see, yes, we are following the path of grid parity, and it's going gradually north, the cheaper the panels and the systems are getting. And I think this is important to know, because it's not only, let's say, radiation and wholesale prices, but it's of course also regulation and market design. So far, for instance, several countries in the Balkan area would theoretically be able to have to be at grid parity as well, but market regulation does not allow, for instance, direct corporate PPAs. So you have to sell to the regulator. And therefore, there is a kind of a monopolistic market structure, which is not allowing us to work on a grid parity level here for the time being. But in Poland, the market has been liberalized. So yes, we are able to perform these virtual PPAs with no limitations so far. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the way we all have to go. I mean, looking at the timeline, you see there is a long timeline starting at 1990 and it goes down to 2050. This is supposed to be the curve of energy consumption. Here's the example of Germany, but it's the same with actually all countries in Europe, if not the world, so far as we can see. There's actually a pretty flat curve, and particularly when you see industrialized countries like European countries, same with Poland, it's relatively flat. So the overall energy consumption is not rising, but it's kind of stable. However, if we all strive towards exchanging conventional energies into renewable energies, then you can see that we have to do really a very, very steep curve in developing renewable energies in order to match that all energy demand by 2050. And this requires a huge kind of area for wind and solar energy in the next coming years, which is, yeah, it's fine, just go for the next slide. Which requires us to use actually all kinds of possible sites for us to deploy further solar and wind projects. And there is some study already available saying, okay, if we would really decarbonize Europe by 2050, how much square kilometers of the European territory would be needed? And it's close to 100,000 square kilometers, which is actually 2% of the European territory. It's, looking at the picture on the right-hand side, almost twice the size of Switzerland or roughly the size of Portugal. So it's a huge amount of land we will need in order to really decarbonize the European continent. But I think it is important to get there. And it's, by the way, possible because if we look into agricultural use right now and how much space we are using for biomass at the moment, then this is already like close to several 100,000 square kilometers in the European Union. So if we would just turn a fraction of the land used for biomass today into PV plants and into wind projects, then the energy transition would be possible.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Benedikt. That does give hope. It's always nice to end with a positive message. I'd move now on to the Q&A session. Just a reminder for attendees to send in your questions. The first one actually comes with regard to your PPA contract as BayWa in Poland, and we would like to know, one of the attendees asks, if you had problems when it came to securing land, and whether the administrative decision is final and binding.
Well, it was actually not problematic to secure the land. There was a quite straightforward process. We had the support from the local mayor and from the local municipality. Let's say the bigger issue actually was to get grid and enough grid capacity here at Witnica. And as a matter of fact, physically, we are now injecting electricity at 2 different locations for that one plant, because it was not possible to inject the whole amount into one grid connection. So I think getting land and getting permits in Poland, I don't see to be a huge constraint for the time being. However, grid is, to what I see, the bigger issue right now.
Clear. And moving a bit more, Benedikt, onto the Polish market. So we all know there's been a recent boom, and kind of everybody is interested in how it's developing. And we also know that, let's say, from a project development side, it's actually it involves lower costs, right? Than, for example, developing a large-scale project than with regards to, for example, other traditional, let's call them Western markets. Do you think that actually this trend will continue? So do you think there's going to be quite a significant price difference in terms of project development in a country like Poland with respect to, for example, Germany, right, its neighbor? And when do you think we will be able to call Poland a mature solar market, if anytime soon?
Well, very good question. To start at the end, is it a mature market? I would say actually it is already quite mature if we look at what possibilities are given in terms of regulation, in terms of market design, and in terms of permitting. Then I think, yes, the Polish market is very well developed and is prepared for a large rollout of grid parity projects in the next coming years. However, the grid might not be. That's a bit of the downside. And when we look into prices, well, of course, it's always a relation between system cost is one parameter. The other important parameter, of course, is radiation. And there we have quite some differences if you look into southern Poland or northern Poland, or eastern and western Poland. So there is differences regarding the radiation. And there is, of course, differences in land shapes and sizes of the plots. But I would say, as we have from the demand side of electricity right now, a very positive situation in Poland. It's very attractive right now, because if you look at the electricity mix, the Polish electricity mix nowadays, 80% is coming from coal. But we have many companies working in Poland right now who are committed to renewable targets and to reducing their footprint. And we have many customers worldwide right now demanding from their suppliers that they minimize their footprint. So the easiest one for the companies to go is to go for green electricity. But where can you buy green electricity in a market which is supplied 80% by coal? So that's giving a problem to many companies. And this is the reason why the demand for green electricity right now is quite high in Poland.
Yeah, all clear on that side. And Benedikt, I think we have one question with regards to a particular technology which you mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation, where BayWa renewable is actually quite strong. With regards to floating, the question is if you actually have identified Poland as a relevant market for floating PV.
Well, not yet. We are not looking into floating opportunities in Poland as we speak. Why is this? Well, it's mainly, of course, floating is applicable where you have high land costs and, let's say, small plots of land, because historically, if you look into Germany or into Netherlands, for instance, the farmers really were working on small plots. If I want to go now in Germany or in Netherlands to assemble like 100 hectare or so for a 100 megawatt plant, it's very cumbersome. It's very difficult because you have to negotiate with 20 farmers. Yeah? In Poland, we don't have that problem because due to the communist history, there was a kind of a land restructuring, so we have bigger plots. So in a nutshell, it is right now cheaper to go for ground-mounted installations in Poland than for floating. But having said that, yes, the capex of a floating solar system are higher, but normally the operational costs are lower because the lease tends to be lower, and also the maintenance is cheaper because we don't need to fence it, we don't need to have security cameras around it, etc., etc. So there's up and downsides. But for the time being, as it is easy to access applicable land at a reasonable price in Poland, I think the ground-mounted market will be predominating.
Clear. Thanks, Ben. Also, coming back to what you said earlier, right, in regards to demand for green energy by the local Polish companies. Of course, there's very increasing ESG standards applied now to companies. Of course, as you mentioned, they have their customers demanding a higher, let's say, commitment to green energy purchase. So who do you think will the next off-takers of such purchases of PPA contracts be? Who do you expect them to be in Poland, and what's the outlook for that PPA market there?
Well, there are several companies who are striving towards a zero footprint. They are in a club which is called 0100, wasn't it? It's a club of companies where of 100 companies who want to be 100% renewable. This club is a growing club of companies who are dedicated to minimize their footprint. Those companies are demanding green electricity all over the place. And it also applies to, the Googles and Amazons of this world, but also classical industrial companies like Heidelberg Cement in this example here. So the high demand industrial complexes in Poland will have an interest to secure themselves against rising electricity prices. As everybody can expect that we have CO2 prices kicking in particular, the Polish electricity price will be impacted negatively. So the prices in Poland are said to rise in the next coming years. And obviously, those companies will try to hedge themselves against that price risk.
Yeah, indeed. One question which we have also is with regards to grid parity projects in Poland. One attorney would like to know if renewable energy projects are operating under a free market structure, or are they subsidized by the government? By free market structure, I believe also here we're speaking about the tender and the auction scheme in Poland. And what do you think will be the outlook for the next 5 years? I think here we can answer quite directly on how they're operating, but I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did decide not to attend to the tenders because literally we are ending up with having a contract for difference anyway. If it is a tender or if it is a corporate PPA, it's literally financially from a cash flow perspective the same picture. The difference is on the tender and the tariff, we have the Polish government as a counterparty risk, and for a corporate PPA, we have a company as a counterparty risk. Now, having the Polish government as a counterparty risk exposes us and investors to Polish politicians and the political situation in Poland.
It's never funny.
Yeah, no.
Never funny.
which nobody can predict for the next 20 years. If we had a Google or an Amazon as being a counterparty risk, many investors see this as being the safer place to be. And this is why we think corporate PPAs will be outrunning tender schemes of governments. That's not only the case in Poland, it happens also in Greece, in Spain, in Italy, even in Germany, because, politicians then tend to limit their tender volumes, and they also restrict the areas where you can build or the sizes of the installations you can make. This is not the case with the corporate PPAs. Nobody gives you regulation about how big the installation will be on the corporate side. So that's to be seen as an advantage from a developer perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, another question regards also to the government political situation, still on the PPA. Benedikt, can you tell us if you actually get a higher price having the PPA concluded directly with the corporate than having a PPA concluded with a trader?
Well, yes, you can achieve higher PPA prices because if you sell to the trader has to turn around and find some off-taker in your behalf, and he will ask for money for that, of course.
Always good to cut the middleman there.
Yeah.
Perfect. And let's also have a question, with regards to the broader political spectrum, because let's take, for example, the situation with wind energy in Poland, right? There has recently been a big liberalization with regards to wind installations, which kind of overturned the usually, let's say, conservative, if I can use that term, policy towards renewables in Poland. Now, I would like to know from you, Benedikt, if you think there will be any additional steps taken also with regards to solar, perhaps to incentivize installations, and what's your opinion on this matter?
Well, actually, I mean, honestly, we had quite some interesting, let's say, experiences with wind in Poland, as we as BayWa were and are still operating a wind farm in Kamionka in the north, and we were hit by the regulatory changes, and there we could see, in our own operating asset how deep the changes are, and that you are completely exposed to political changes, and you have no chance to react or to adapt. So this is something which I see as a threat. If and I only hope that the political establishment and the government will not interfere too much here in the solar side and leave the market forces as they are and let them develop as they are doing now, because the only thing they can do now is to destroy the things or to hinder us to develop. And I don't hope that that's going to happen short term.
Yes, okay there. And Benedikt, I think we can wrap it up with one question with regards to financing that comes from one of the attendees. The question is, don't you get better financing with the auction? The attendee assumes that banks love tariffs. I believe also here in regards to financing conditions. Could you comment on that one?
The answer is clear no. There is no better finance on tenders than on CPPAs. It of course depends on the bankability of the off-taker. So if you have a AAA off-taker, it's to be seen from a banking side a better kind of or lower risk than the Polish government.
Indeed. So let's say to wrap the today's webinar, Benedikt, if you could share one message for all, whether it's developers or any other stakeholder approaching themselves to the Polish market, would you say, yes, it's time to come in, invest, build something in Poland? It's already a mature market. How would you view that?
Yeah, I would love to encourage everybody to go for developments, but I would recommend also that you team up with some experienced bigger players. But it's not only BayWa, there's also other companies out there. But of course, I would be delighted if you would join a co-development with us, because I think we can provide deep knowledge with regards to development, grid access, but also PPAs. And I think this is key to be successful in a merchant market, which Poland is. So yeah.
Perfect. And of course, that also brings me to one necessary point. Whoever is listening in is actually interested to learn more about the Polish market, we're also hosting, of course, if the conditions are allowed to do so, the Solar Future Poland event in Warsaw on May the 27th. So multiple stakeholders there. You'll also get the chance to meet Benedikt. Let's hope, Benedikt, that can actually happen. We're strongly looking forward to that. Well, Benedikt, what to say here? I think we came to the conclusion. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for being with us. Really some great insights and very good comments and prospects. And that would be it for today. So Benedikt, thanks again for being with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for everybody tuning in. As you say in Polish, dziękuję. Thank you very much. And again, if you want to stay in touch with us, you'll find us at poland.solarplaza.com with more regards to the Solar Future Poland event. Thanks everybody again for being with us today.